So I've done 10,000 prompts so far, and I've written two, three big apps, including Aura and Dreamcut, which are the main ones. They have well over 100,000 lines of code each. And Aura specifically is an app that, generate beautiful designs using prompts. And we also have a guide about it. So if you want to learn how to prompt, this is the video for you. And I'm going to be sharing all the techniques that I've learned over the creation of these tools, but also generating so many designs that you can find in my profile. You can see here I have 344 designs, including really well animated, beautiful designs, not like the type that you would expect from AI. So, it's going to be very interactive, it's going to be very colorful, and it's really made for designers. Now, if you've never done prompting or you don't really know what it is, basically, anytime that you're using AI, you have to give instructions. And there are really essential understanding of what those instructions are. So if you do something general, of course, you don't need to know much about the technicality, but if you're generating designs or websites or landing pages, then you're gonna need to know the vocabulary of all of these terms and how to do it. So definitely suggest to learn about fonts, typography, animation techniques, layout, and so on. So this is a really good starting point for you. You can go to the guide for prompting, typography, animations, layout, and we also have some sort of like a mini version of the prompt builder, and you can sort of play with how you would, generate these types of layouts and animations. Also has a prompt builder. You can learn about the different types of animations such as scale, rotate, blur, and so on. So let's talk about results. Usually you generate your UI and you generate your site. You would prompt this in a box that looks like this. It looks like a ChatGPT app, but in this case, we're going to be focusing on design. So level, for example, you can just ask for a prompt, but you don't really know where to start. And usually it's a pretty good idea to sort of, start with a template. You also have V0, you can fork, you have bolt, again, pretty much the same technique. But the thing is, it doesn't really handhold you in terms of, how to do UI. And also we have Figma sites that's coming, Figma Make. And so this skill is going to be really useful regardless of what platform that you use. Now, the difference is in these platforms is that you are essentially generating full-on websites. It's going to take a lot of time. It's going to be very complex. It's going to use React and a lot of components that you might not understand, which is why I think it's pretty good to start with Aura, because we're just down to the essence. So the HTML and the CSS, it's much faster. It has a live preview. And on top of that, if you're a beginner, it's really good to have something like a prompt builder. So a prompt builder, this is where you want to either start with a template or you have, so for example, you want to generate, a UI for a mobile app, or you want to generate a card. You just want to vibe the styling of the UI. You want the color setup, the font setup, the type of layout that you want to build. And, Aura has right now over 800 templates that you can use from animations, mobile, 3D, etc. Right? And these are not just like baby stuff or like very generic, very boring designs. These are things that I have spent a lot of time coming up with all my years of experience building UI, but also building apps, meaning that you have to know about all of these libraries, all of these assets that you can use, like spline, like like the globe or the fonts and all that stuff. So it's good to start with this. This is my most recommended way to start. And something like, for example, you want to generate a card like this, for example, and you want something, I don't know, a feature card, and you want a four cards. So you can do that. You can add to your prompt and then you can just press enter, and it's going to generate the UI. And you didn't need to type anything, which is great because it's kind of like removing the barrier to entry for a lot of people. And in this case, you have a light preview. And this is only possible because we are using HTML JavaScript. And as you can see, you don't need to wait so long to create so many files and setup. And, and oftentimes, a lot of designers, they start with this and they see an error and they don't know how to deal with that, especially in Cursor. But that happens a lot also on, Lovable, V0, and all that stuff. And the reason is very simple, is because you're using React. You can see here, we're all doing everything live, and we're, selecting from a template. We didn't have to write anything at all. So I think this is really cool. But on top of that, what is cool about Aura, and I want to make something for designers, is that you can also export to Figma. So all of these layers can be brought to Figma if you want to make that as part of your design system, and you want to kind of like work within a big team environment, and you already have an existing workflow, and maybe you're not the engineer, you're just like the prototyper. And I don't mean just, I mean like you are the prototyper, and you're doing important work, of course. But like everyone has their workflow, and it's important to test the limits of it, and to be creative, and to to say something like, okay, I want in light mode. Now, yeah, I use Claude so much, so I'm gonna switch to 4.1. So I'm gonna say I want in light mode. So yeah, to know all of these terms, and to know sort of like what you want to build. But in this case, you have a prompt builder, so you just need to know how to click around, and you have to have taste. So taste is something that you build over the years, and you know what looks good and what doesn't look good. So again, with just a few prompts, right, I was able to create something that, gives me the style that I want, the sort of like approach that I want. Maybe I want to create and build a prototype. And so this is really interesting. But again, you can type in the chat, I want something in light mode, or you can use the prompt builder. And we have in 4 different categories, right? So you have the layout type, which is the layout that you want to build. Is it a hero? Is it a feature section? Usually you're building a website. So these are kind of like 4 websites and apps. Is it mobile? Is it web? And even if let's say you create a portfolio, you have different layout configuration. Does it have a table? Does it have a sidebar? Is it a bento layout, or is it a feature focus, or is it split? How is it split vertically, horizontally? All of these things that you're going to learn as you get more comfortable with building layouts. And then you have the framing. And the framing, to me, I know a lot of people don't care about it, especially if you're making a website, but I care about it because I'm a designer. And usually as a designer, you have to think about the presentation. So whether you're putting it in a card or you're putting it in a frame, that makes it look 10 times better. And that's why most of the time when you go on Twitter, people are going to be posting their design within a frame rather than the whole website. Usually they show a screenshot of the browser, or they create their own custom screenshot, as well as drop shadow, right? So the framing for me is really important, and I wanted this to be part of the Aura experience. So this is about layout. And then we have the styling. Do you want a flat, style? Do you want an outline style? I would say flat is the most basic form of UI, and you see that on 99% of website, it's using a flat layout. Outline is kind of becoming more and more popular, especially with, more modern apps like, Apple, Linear, Vercel, and, Figma use a lot of outlines. And I think it's really great. It makes your app more modern. And, keep in mind that when I say outline, we also include like the dividers and, oftentimes if you just use flat, you would see like these buttons here without an outline, and it's hard to tell the difference between the background and the element itself, which is why I believe that having an outline kind of makes it uh, easier to deal with depth. So having multiple layers on top of each other. So outline, I like. I highly recommend it, and also minimal, which is also very very popular nowadays. Which is why you see much more spacing between elements, much more padding, and it gives more room for breathing and also less clutter, so less elements. And then you have the glass, which is very omnipresent in iOS and the Mac, and a lot of modern websites, especially in dark mode, is going to use translucency, iOS material. So these are pretty common. And then you have light mode, dark mode. I think it's fun that I have this preview here, and I really want to make it like an easy representation of what I'm talking about. And also for someone who's a beginner, they can sort of like look at this and they're like, oh, I understand what he means. Like instead of just a word, it's just giving me a visual representation because we are visual creatures. And so, you have the primary colors, you have the background, which is really useful, especially if you have a framing involved, like, you're building a card. You have the border, or you can have a transparent border. And this is also another thing that I'm really, really passionate about is the shadow. And I'm sure you've seen a lot of these beautiful designs on Twitter. What makes them special, honestly, is the shadow, oftentimes, because a lot of the designs are very basic. They showcase like the information architecture and all that stuff. But in this case, okay, so we have shadow, you have the small one. These are tailwind base, which make it super simple. And as I click, notice that I'm having all of these really terms that can be used directly for AI in your prompt, okay? And, again, the shadow, so shadow dash 2XL. And the reason why I didn't put it into just CSS term is it's so much more concise in Tailwind, and it's also more control. Because if you have like the whole spectrum of colors and shadows in CSS, it will never end. And oftentimes they don't look very good. So it's good to have some sort of like a template for it, even though you have so much flexibility. So another thing that I added was the beautiful shadows. And so the difference between, the basic Tailwind shadow is that it's a single shadow, but the beautiful shadows, just like the Figma plugin, you're going to have multiple shadows. And it's going to use, like, for example, you can have double, triple shadows, and you can have colored shadows. So these are not basic shadows. And also you can have like inner shadows on top of it. So this is great as a shadow for like a frame, like a mock-up or something like a button. You can have like 3D shadows, you can have inner shadows. So there's so much flavor to design that is not fully explored in the AI world right now, because usually when you ask for these things in AI, it's going to give you the most basic form of UI possible. But as we all know, in Figma, is not as basic as a flat design. So all the things we have discussed so far is in the form of a fully fleshed component. So for example, I can go to web, hero, and then you can see these are the hero elements. And these are, extremely, well, I wouldn't say extremely, but at least it's polished enough to a point where you can use it as a template and you can customize it, right? You can go here and then you copy the code and you can bring that to any, AI platform that you want. The same thing with using different styles of fonts and different types of layout and different backgrounds. So you can see this is using a spline animation in the background, which is full screen, and you have different styles of cards and so on. And so, and then you have so many types of hero, right? Like usually a hero, you have a navigation here. You have sort of like the title, the text, and the call to action, as well as the element where you're going to be presenting for the website. The hero is extremely important because it's the first thing that people are going to see when they land on your website. And, once you have like the right styling, you can just change the text, change the logo, change the description, the call to actions, and make it a little bit more suitable for the app that you're making. And then as I mentioned before, you have different styles of layouts and different categories of layouts, such as features and testimonials, and you can filter these as well. So, and then you have like the mobile stuff, and then you have the different tags. So there's a lot of things that you can explore, and it's really important to sort of like find what you like, and this is where the taste comes in, because more and more AI is going to come, more and more we're going to have choices, right? And the question is, how do you pick the right ones for the app that you're building, and to make it as high conversion as possible? And so, yeah, you have to explore, you have to play, and then you have to prompt, and then you have to sort of like understand the functions and how it works. And that part again is just taste building. You go to download so many apps, and then you try them, and then you make sure that you understand how it works. So again, moving on, let's give it a test. For example, we already did layout, but we can definitely do style, right? So light mode, dark mode, yes, I typed it, but in this case, let's continue with light mode. And I want to play with the shadow. So what I recommend, if you have like a normal shadow, it's good to have a border. But if you have like multiple shadows, like for example the beautiful shadow right here, I'm gonna use medium, and I'm gonna use transparent border. So I'm gonna add this to the prompt, and you can see the change in shadow. So right now the shadows are right. You can see this in most websites, but I'm just gonna add this singular prompt, and it's going to change all the shadows for me, which is really cool. Look, we have these beautiful, gorgeous shadows that you see a lot of designers use. And from here, right, from the shadow that we had before to the new shadow, again, we have beautiful live preview, which is really useful. And I'm just going to wait for this to finish so that I can switch and kind of give you the difference. So this is before, and this is after. Again, most people will not recognize it, and that's why taste comes in, right? Like if you think about it, the first time you taste coffee, you don't know all of these nuances, so you cannot really tell the difference between great coffee and just normal coffee. But eventually, as you become like a coffee snob, you kind of taste all the nuances of coffee. And the same with design. Like at first you're not going to be like, oh, I like, you're not going to be able to tell the difference between this shadow and this shadow. But as you get better, you will be able to absolutely tell the difference. And by doing that, people will feel that you care through your work, which is really important. And usually that's what brings all of these high conversion and high value customers that really cares about these details. And now the same with dark mode and light mode. I could have just used the prompt builder, but the prompt builder is really good for me. So first of all, I'm going to reset this. I'm going to go to style, and I'm going to go with dark mode. Now, keep in mind that I can also just focus on a single prompt. So for example, I don't want to tell, because sometimes too much information is too much information, right? So sometimes when you say something and AI really takes that to the book, it can be detrimental to what you actually want. So if you just want like a simple thing, for example, I wanted dark mode, just focus on that. Go simple. Don't try to come up with like 500 words in a prompt, because most likely AI is going to do a lot more wrong than right. And that's why I would just suggest, okay, you want dark mode, just say you want dark mode. And then you have that as part of your iterations. which is really important. Again, AI is really, really good. Even, chat GPT 4.1, I like to use Claude. Usually it's a bit more advanced. It's a little bit better, but, 4.1 is cheaper and it does a really good job, especially if it has context. So what I mean by context, I mean like all of these examples that I have before, all of these templates that I have before, and all of these iterations that I have before. So that is the context that allows AI to do a far better job than, than starting from scratch. Starting from scratch is a lot harder, especially in terms of like coming up with new icons from scratch or new styles from scratch. And so you can see most AI is going to do a good job, especially if if you're using the good ones like 4.1 and also Claude 3.7. So you can see simple prompt, use dark mode, and it gives me a beautiful version of the dark mode. Another thing to keep in mind is that we're using Tailwind. So because we're using Tailwind AI, it has a system in place in which it's pretty easy to switch between light mode and dark mode because we're using like, the color codes like -100 versus -900. And those are really good for switching between. The same with using the tones of gray. It's going to stick to the tone of gray. So if you look here, this is not exactly neutral colors. It's using gray. And therefore, when it switches to dark mode, it's also using the gray tone, which is not exactly neutral, actual gray tone. So those things are to keep in mind. And then we're going to discuss about typography, which is extremely important. And finally, we're going to finish with animation, and then we're going to get into the more advanced stuff. So typography, again, you don't need to click everything. You don't need to give so much context all the time. But if you start from scratch or if you want to completely revamp the typography, it's fine. So for example, I'm going to select here, and then we have a bunch of the most popular fonts that I pre-selected for you guys. And so, you have different families, so sans, serif. It's important to kind of explore to see the styling that you want. Typically, sans is for most, 99% of websites and apps, but serif is good for like the more traditional ones. And sometimes for titles, you're gonna use serif. It's kind of fun. And then monospace is for coding, but also for kind of futuristic, more modern style with similar space letters. And then condense, it's also very good for like posters and titles. Expanded the same way. Rounded for fun, so like kids app and fun kind of looking. And then handwritten, this is good for signatures and stuff like that. So again, nuances that you will discover later on, and feel free to use the prompt builder to just experiment with it. And the other thing I want to discuss is like, where do you put, the different fonts? So for example, you have the heading font and you have the body font. So this is what we call font pairing. And usually for the title, you're going to have like a different font. So for example, I could use Inter. Inter is the most popular one so far. But you can also have guys, which is a trending one. You have Manrobe and Space Cortez and different ones. So go with these, and then you have the body font. So for example, if you want to go with like a serif font as the title, like for example, this one, and the body font, usually you could have serif, but I would say if you have a modern app, a serif font works for the title, but the UI font, I would definitely stick to, Inter guys and, the sans font. But if you have like a newspaper font or like a newspaper app, like a book app, it's fine to use serif all the way. So like small nuances, these are not hard rules, but you can definitely follow them. So, I want to use serif for the title, but for the body, I'm going to use Inter or Geist. Again, just look at it. And also the sizes, that again depends on what you're building. If you're building components like what we are right now, like cards, you want to use smaller. If you're building a hero, you want to use bigger. So in this case, I'm using cards. I don't want them to be too big. And subheading, again, depends if you have subheading. Body, And you can disable them if you don't want to mention them. Body is the same. You want smaller. Again, the more containers that you have, usually the smaller the font is going to be, because you have to have information density, and you don't want, like, unless you have like a big huge section, no container, then you have bigger fonts. If you have like a card and you have small button, you have like a small tag button, for example, then the font is going to be smaller. So in this case, I can get away with, the smallest or the body one. Let's go with this one, since we're using 4 cards, so we have more information density, so it has to fit everything. And finally, you have the letter spacing. Again, if you want to go with the font weight, again, it depends on the styling. Usually I would start with medium or semi-bold if for titles. But also you have the letter spacing. Again, if you're using a title, it's better to use tight and tighter. But if you're using normal fonts, then normal is fine. So this is roughly what I have so far, and we can definitely add this. And it's good to have a range. So for example, here 20 to 30, etc. But you're gonna see the difference, and it's through experimentation that you're gonna get better at this as you go. All right, so this is what we have. We changed the font, and we have sort of like an idea of the sizes. I think the AI is pretty good. If you want to compare, this is what we had before, and this is what we have now. Yes, I use serif. I could have not used it, but I just wanted to give you an example of what you can do with it. And you can see that we use serif for headings, but we didn't use it for the body font. So, again, this is good to know. And finally, we're going to get into the animation. So animation is really fun. Let me just reset this first. And, it's good to have an example here. So you have fade, slide, scale, and we have so many, right? And you can see 3D, pulse, shake, bounce, morph. Keep in mind that the representation doesn't always work, because it's very, very complex to come up with all of that stuff. But sometimes you see it like morph. It kind of looks funky and fun, skew, colors, and all of these things. But the main ones are fade, right? Like usually this is where you're going to see everywhere. But you also have slide a lot. And also you can decide to go all at once. So it's going to animate the whole thing. Or you can go by sequence, meaning that one by one, it's going to go, and it's going to have a little delay of 0.1 second. And then it's going to go one by one. You also have like word by word. So this is good for just specific titles and letter by letter. Now, again, I would say that AI has a bit more trouble. I think the maturity of AI hasn't reached the sort of like expertise that we would have normally with so many years of experience with web design, but it does work. I've been using this. It requires a little bit more prompt. It does work. But the common one that I recommend would be all at once or sequence. And the other thing is you can also select multiple ones. So I can select fade, scale, and slide. I can even select blur as well. So obviously, when you can play with the timing and all that stuff, the delay, the duration, the timing. The most common one is easing out. You can spring if you want like to have the bounciness and all that stuff. You can also iteration. So if you're doing like a loading screen, it's going to infinitely like spin and stuff like that. But in this case, we only want to happen once, and then you have the iteration. So is it going to be a ping pong or, and stuff like that. So a lot of small details that you're going to be learning over time. I'm not going to focus too much on this. Let's just focus on the basics. And let's just focus on these 3 main ones and use a sequence animation. So we're going to add this. So again, it's mentioning these 3 ones, and it's mentioning sequence. It's also mentioning the duration. So we're going to add this, and we're going to hope for the best. Animation with live preview is a little bit harder, but it does work. it's not going to have the same sort of like amazing live preview. It does flash a little bit because it needs to reset. I need to improve this experience. All right, finally, so we have the animation. If I refresh, it's beautiful. What I'm noticing that it made a little bit of mistake. Maybe it added some bounciness. Maybe I should have mentioned about easing out. So this is the type of thing that you want to play with, but it works. It does the sequence animation, it does the scale, the fade, the slide, all of these at once. And because of the prompting that I did, there's no magic behind it. This is just purely prompting. Prompting is all about knowing what to say in the most technical term possible, in which as accurate as possible, the AI is able to understand you. This is the whole point of prompting. But it's not perfect by any mean, unless, of course, you give the full breadth of the code, which is what we did at the beginning. Then it becomes extremely precise because it doesn't need to do more than that. It doesn't need to interpret. It doesn't need to understand all of these nuances of what you mean. So that's why, yes, you will have sometimes a little bit of nuances, a little bit of flavor, a little bit of mistakes sprinkled on all of that stuff. All right, so now to the advanced part. And this is where the sky is the limit, right? The prompt builder is there to get you started, to, to adapt, to create, to know how to use the vocabulary and all that stuff. But oftentimes we build on top of each other. So looking at all the iterations that we have made so far, right? This is also another thing that I really wanted to put in Aura, and it's very unique. You can browse all the things that you have created so far. And you're going to see, how did I create this? Because certainly I didn't use the prompt builder from scratch. And the secret is that we are using the open source community. And the fact is, yes, you can ask AI, it's going to also do the same thing, but we want to be more precise. And I want to show you some of the resources that I love personally, that I find amazing. And again, these comes from authors, and they share it with everyone. And I think that's amazing. So CodePen is amazing. You can go to codepen.io and you can browse here. And, this is a mentality that has existed forever in the open source community. We have done that with coding, but most recently we're doing more and more with design, especially with AI sharing everything and making everything so much more powerful. So you can browse through this and then find something that you like, and essentially you can bring that code and then ask AI to remix that code, right? And if you like an effect, if you like a specific, maybe you like these clouds here, you can do that. All you need to do is to copy the code, for example. And, I could have done that with Cursor. I don't have to do that with Aura. It has nothing to do with Aura, but I just want to give you an example of how you would do it. So, for example, you would copy the code, you would go to something like Lovable, right? And you would paste all of that beautiful code. And let me just do this here. And then at the end, you can say something like adapt for, but for the sake, obviously, I'm not going to release as is. Usually when you take a template, whether in Figma, whether using a UI kit, you don't want to just use the essential one. You want to use it as a fork, as a baseline, right? So it's like, think of, Cursor being, a fork of VS Code, right? You want to use that as a baseline, and then you want to sprinkle your creativity on top of it. But I just wanted to show you the technique involved to do that, to start with the fork and then to customize it and to make it better, and to use the prompt template to to kind of improve upon it. So again, this is the basic template. And at this point, you want to customize the font, you want to customize the colors. So for example, I want something like in light mode and change, adapt to a payment card. What, however you want to do it, it's up to you. But just make sure that you know, you're changing it. So this is a bit of a poor example, but I want to show you that, by just prompting a little bit, I, turn something, I remix it, like this also is common in Framer. You can remix a template. I change using AI, and I turn it into light mode. And, it's kind of like keeping some of the essence, especially if I kept it the same colors, it would probably keep even more. So you have CodePen. What I would say is that there are multiple ways to browse CodePen. And of course, if you appreciate the work from all of these amazing creators, make sure to mention them in your tweet, especially if you're going to share it in public. But obviously, we're all here to support each other, and we want to change as much as possible from the original. And there are definitely amazing creators that I highly recommend that you follow, like Jay, for example. And he has a lot of amazing tweets where he shows the techniques that he used and the code that he used and all that stuff. It's all available publicly in CodePen, so you can remix them and you can play with them, you can change them, you can make it and use it for your website. And another way that I like to browse CodePen is through Google. So, just the same way as Stack Overflow, you start with CodePen and then you type what you want to see. So, for example, cards and holodeck, and maybe you want to take a look at the Pokemon cards and see the source code that is being shared. And this is really cool. A lot of amazing work out there that you can definitely play and then customize and make it different from the original and make it sort of like something that you could use for your own design. Another website that I find really, really good is also 21st Dev. They have a lot of amazing components that you can use. So like a lot of them are premium, a lot of them are free, but you can fork them. You can open the component. The code is also shared. Just keep in mind that it is using React, which means that oftentimes a lot of the code are actually imported from ShatCN and all that stuff, so they might not be visible within the code. But let me just find something that is a little bit simpler, like this one. Yeah, it depends what you're trying to create. So open component here, and I don't know why the code is not shown, but you should be seeing the code, and yeah, there are some amazing effects. So here's the code. I don't know why some of these don't work, but let me focus here. You can see this is React code, and it's great, but it does require a bit more technical knowledge. So oftentimes it's going to import from other libraries that are not part of this code, which is why AI might have a bit of a trouble compared to something like like this beautiful effect here that I'm using, shader. You go to the code, and all of this code is there. There's no import, there's no hidden code, there's no React libraries out there that is not part of this code that AI cannot use. So oftentimes, if you copy a code like this from something like Aura, for example, or CodePen, you're not going to have trouble translating that using AI. But a little nuance here. They both. I'm not saying one is better than the other one, but the React one requires more technical knowledge, and oftentimes a lot of the code is hidden, which is not a bad thing, especially if you work already in an existing React project. So just different flavors. And then let me discuss about the different libraries that you can be using and you can be mentioning to AI, not necessarily needing to copy the code. So for example, we have Kobe, which is great for generating this beautiful, beautiful the earth and globe that is draggable. It comes with different colors and all that stuff. And you can bring the code, but you can also mentioning it to AI. So for example, I can go to to here, and I can say add a Kobe JS globe, right? And AI is smart enough to understand the context of it because it's a library and it exists and it's popular, right? And so you can also, if it doesn't work, you can copy this code and you can bring that to Aura, for example, or Lovable. Again, I'm not specific to Aura. There are other libraries. So Venta.js, which is really cool as well. So you have different styles, you have like different, backgrounds, and some of them might be 3D if I'm not mistaken. But all of these things that you can use for your project as a background. And then we have the JavaScript libraries that are more like, you know, effects and stuff like that, not necessarily as a background. It's interactive. And so you can see here, it's really cool. And, get familiar with it. So for example, I have this snow one. So usually they come with different examples. So you have the snow, you have NASA, you know, and they all come with different settings and interactive and particles, and you can really customize. And the cool thing about some of these libraries is that they have so much more flexibility versus just taking from a template. Again, it depends on your level of expertise and how much flexibility that you want. There's also particles, but also there's another one that I really like called Matter.js, and it's really, really cool. It's a physics engine, and you can see you have so many examples of these physics things that you can use for your website, and you have all of these demos that you can play with, and you have mixed shape, you have like pyramid, you have stress, so many example. I can't go through all of them, but this is all possible, and it's just amazing. Another resource that I really like to use is code drops. Again, some of them more as inspiration, and some others more as like a library. For example, I would name drop that in Aura. But code drops has a ton of these shared code where they create these amazing examples. It's a little bit more advanced. Oftentimes, the code is on GitHub, and anything that is on GitHub can have multiple files, so you have to be more advanced. So for example, if I want to use this, I might need to download the entire thing. I might need to ask AI to include all of these JavaScript files in order to be able to achieve the same result. You can see there's many multiple files, which is why, again, let's keep it simple for a lot of people out there who are beginners. So that's why if you go to a place like Aura, for example, and you want like a card like this, or you want like a book, for example, like this one, which is really cool, then you don't need to scour the web and find all of these files. You just need to go to export, copy the code, and then you bring that to Aura. So you go to create, and then you paste this, and then you can add like a prompt adapt for, a payment card or something like that. And it's going to create something similar to what is using as a context. So you can see, I use the book and I turn it into a payment card. It changed the gradient, but it's using the same sort of like effect and all that stuff. So creativity is your limit at this point. With AI, there's no limit, right? You can do anything you want. You can achieve anything you want without so many years of experience, but it doesn't mean that it's not useful though. So knowing how to say the right things and finding the right resource is why I made this video. And hopefully you enjoy learning all about these resources, about all the techniques, and hopefully, give Aura a try. This is something I poured, my heart and soul into this product to create something that is solving for me. But yeah, please let me know what you think about it, and please give it a try. At least take a look at the prompt template or the prompt guide, but also, have fun with it. And I'll see you in the next video.